every single time that I think, hey, maybe Rob Manfred isn't such a bad commissioner, he goes and comes up with some absolutely insane rule that really doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Today, we're talking about the golden at-bat rule. I want to talk about the arguments for and against it, because maybe it's not as simple as, this rule sucks. Maybe it's a little more. Maybe there is some merit to the idea. So I decided to really think about it and hear other people's takes on the golden at-bat rule. If you don't know what the rule is, it's essentially a way for a team in any given situation to choose to use their golden at-bat and bring up whoever they want from their batting order. Let's say the Dodgers, for example, they're down 1-0 in the 9th. They have Shohei at the plate. Shohei strikes out. Well, they can suddenly call Shohei up again to bat in the next at-bat. That's a very simplified way of putting it, and we're going to try and elaborate on how it's beneficial for each team, what's the good things about it, and what's the bad things about it in this video. Let's start with the arguments for it. It increases the drama of the game. It really makes things a lot, I don't want to say more interesting, but it does make things interesting, I guess. The Dodgers come up in a critical situation, and it's bottom of the 9th, they're down a run, and all of a sudden, instead of Will Smith, they could put Shohei Ohtani up at the plate. It's kind of a cool idea that your best player is going to come up to the plate no matter what, so you always have a chance to win the game, tie the game, do something important. You love to see that. You love to see that, because think about all the incredible moments in baseball history where things could have changed had you had your best batter at the plate. That would have changed moments in history. I saw a clip of Trevor Plouffe where he said that in any other sport, you put the ball into the hands of your best players at the end of the game. In basketball, you're giving the last shot to Steph Curry. You're giving that last possession to LeBron James. In football, you're giving it to your best running back, or you're throwing to your best receiver, whatever the concept is. You all know that the best players in the game are the ones that kind of control things at the end. In baseball, it's a little different. In baseball, there's a specific order that you're going in. And sometimes that doesn't include your, 2, 3, 4 hitters. And instead, it's your 7, 8, 9 hitters in the order. I think that's a really good point. I do think that that's a good argument for a potential golden at-bat rule. I don't know that it necessarily covers everything, but we're trying to make an argument for it. In my opinion, it's harder for me to make an argument for it. I'm trying to stay open-minded, but it just doesn't feel like a good baseball rule. If I'm being completely honest, it doesn't feel super, super good for the game to me, but I've been wrong in the past. I wasn't really a huge fan of the pitch clock. I didn't mind bigger bases, to be honest, but I wasn't a huge fan of the pitch clock, and that changed the entire game of baseball for the better. I really think that Rob Manfred had a hit there. He absolutely nailed it. But there's other rules that I think are stupid, like the ghost runner. I go back and forth on that in my mind because, again, it is probably fine for the regular season. You got a ghost runner out there. They don't implement it into the playoffs, so that's good. The golden at-bat rule would be very interesting if you did have your best players up there. But let's talk about the flip side, the arguments against it. And this is going to be a lot easier for me to make because I think that the arguments against it pile up a lot higher than the arguments for it. Let's do the flip side of Trevor Plouffe's thing about putting the ball into your best player's hands. We do that in baseball. You do put the ball into the pitcher's hands. The reason that it's not the same in baseball is because, hey, the pitchers are the ones controlling the ball. Baseball is just very different than like basketball. This is the only sport where defense is actually the ones that are controlling the ball. Hockey, the puck is controlled by the offensive players. Basketball, the ball is controlled by the offensive players. Football, the ball is controlled by the offensive players. In a sense, you are putting the ball into the hand of the best player on your team, which is presumably at that moment your closer. Obviously, there's exceptions to that rule. Most of the time, starting pitchers are better. In that critical situation at the end of games, your closer is usually your best pitcher in the pen. It also kind of screws over other players. I'm just going to use this as a simple example. Imagine Volpe falls out of favor with the Yankees. Anytime that he's about to come up to the plate in the 8th or 9th inning, the Yankees go, hey, we're using our golden at bat. And they go ahead, put Judge in that spot in the order. So now Volpe, maybe he needed X amount of at-bats in order to get some sort of bonus pay or something like that. And they decided, hey, he hasn't been very good for us this year, but we don't have another alternative at shortstop. We're going to put Judge in. Now, all of a sudden, Judge is getting an extra at-bat every game. That could theoretically be an extra 100 to 120 at-bats per year. Now, all of a sudden, no records are sacred because Judge almost hit 60 home runs in a regular season. He could probably get 80 home runs in next season if suddenly the golden at bat was there. So not only is that unfair to our example player Volpe or whoever the team decides to continuously basically like pinch hit for, but not really pinch hitting, it's ridiculous. It's unfair to that player. And now it's unfair to the record books. Now what do? Are we going to sit here and, change the entire way that we have to look at records in baseball? There's been plenty of times where people have called into question records and how this works. And, Roger Maris had like 8 extra games over Babe Ruth in a season or something like that. Now we're talking about fucking Judge has 125 extra at bats over the next big player, over Bonds. It starts to get very hairy. What if there's a player that needs to hit X amount of at bats and they get a bonus? Well, now the cheap owners, the shitty guys like John Fisher, they can just replace that guy in the lineup for at least one at bat at any point in time. Another problem is that these lesser known guys don't get their opportunity to showcase themselves in these big moments. Guys without name recognition suddenly don't get the opportunity to be big time playoff heroes. Does David Freese ever become the World Series hero that we know him to be now if the golden at bat exists? Who knows? He was one of the quote unquote like worst players on the Cardinals at that point in time. He may have been the person that they subbed out of the game. I know that's kind of a funky example because, he did it multiple times during the playoffs at multiple situations, but it was really cool to see his emergence and him being in that rhythm of being a clutch player where I don't know if the golden at bat existed, we might not ever have that incredible story. And baseball is nothing if not just a series of heartwarming stories. It's the type of thing that I think about. David Freese had a nice career, but he wasn't anything special. He's not a Hall of Famer or anything like that. But this is a guy that is known in St. Louis and probably never has to buy a beer or a meal there ever again. Rajai Davis, would he ever have gotten a chance to hit that home run against the Cubs? Obviously, the Indians ended up losing that game. He's still a well-known figure that everybody loves in Cleveland as a result of that. That's what we're going to be missing out on, is these other ball players that could become heroes. This isn't like the pitch clock rule that I may have thought was a bad idea because it was hurting the tradition of baseball and this, and that. It doesn't fundamentally change the game. It just forces pitchers to pitch quicker. The golden at bat fundamentally changes the game of baseball. I also just don't think it's a well thought out concept. This completely changes how baseball is played. A sport that has been around for over 150 years is now suddenly going to implant something that it feels more like an arcade style version of baseball. To my understanding, this rule originally came from the Savannah Bananas, which is really cool. And that's a really fun team. And that's a fun concept. But like, it's not a real sport. It's like the Harlem Globetrotters, you know, they're out there having fun to entertain and doing all this goofy shit. Like the NBA is not adopting rules from the Harlem Globetrotter. It feels like a weird rule that you implement into like OOTP after you played for 2 decades running a franchise. It's one of those things that I just really don't think you should fundamentally change baseball that drastically. It kind of toes a line of, is this too much of a gimmick or is this actually good for the game? I don't think it's actually good for the game. I don't think it's fair to opposing teams either. I think the best version of this rule that I've heard was still from Trevor Plouffe, where he basically said in the bottom of the 9th, you should be able to choose which batter you want to lead off the inning. I think that's fine. Or maybe just in the 9th inning at a period, because I don't think it's fair to give home teams that much of an advantage. But I do think that that's like a much better implementation of this golden at-bat idea than, you know, bringing up Shohei right after Shohei just, you know, hit a fly out or something like that. I think that's silly. I think that's weird. Back-to-back at bats. Like there's got to be some sort of rules around this if they're actually going to implement it. And I don't think Rob Manfred has worked out those rules. Obviously, I don't know that for a fact, but from what we've heard, the golden at bat is just this. There has to be more around it if you're going to implement something like that. I don't even know if this is worth testing in the minor leagues. I just really don't. I guess you could. I guess it doesn't hurt anybody, but I don't know. I'm not feeling this rule at all. I'd love to hear your thoughts. I would love to hear more arguments for it because it'd be interesting if you could change my mind and change the way I'm thinking. Let me know in the comment section. How do you feel about the golden at-bat rule? Do you think that it's worthwhile? Do you think that it's even got a chance to ever actually come into fruition? I'm very curious about everybody's opinions on that. And thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel. We got sports videos every other day. And, you know, I'm trying to reach 500 subs by the end of the year. Subscribe to the channel. You'll be helping out a lot. And, yeah, I hope you have a great rest of your day.